Welcome to the Cinematic Trail, an AI-generated deep dive conversation into the ever-evolving world of cinematography. From exposure theory to lens choices, from lighting philosophy to creative workflows, we explore the craft, the gear, and the stories behind the frame, one trail marker at a time. Want to take your cinematography to the next level? Explore our online courses and learn more at cinematic.com. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for weekly insights and inspiration. Let's begin the journey.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Let's dive right in. Today, we are plunging into a question that, well, you've probably heard it hundreds of times. What is the ideal setup?
Right. Is it just, the gear with the highest numbers on the spec sheet? Or maybe whatever the hot new thing is everyone's talking about online?
And as our source material today, a really insightful video from Kristen Ard over at Cinematic makes crystal clear right away. The answer is, well, it's not that simple. It's a resounding, it depends.
Absolutely. For this deep dive, we've been really digging into Chris's philosophy on building a filmmaking gear kit. It's less about specific models, more about principles.
Exactly. We want to get past the endless gear lists and specs and understand the deeper stuff. The things about your specific work, your workflow, your creative vision.
The things that actually matter for deciding what tools are right for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think of it like maybe a shortcut to being more intentional about the equipment choices you make, whatever field you're in.
Exactly. Because these principles, they really do apply broadly. It's about how your tools help your specific process, not just collecting cool stuff.
The first big idea, the core premise really that comes through so strongly is this. Building the right setup. It's not really about the specs first.
Yeah.
It's about understanding yourself, your work, and crucially, your wallet.
He puts it really plainly. There's just no universal best camera or lens or whatever. Just like there's no single best hammer for every job. The ideal setup, he argues, depends completely on the kind of work you actually do most of the time, your personal workflow habits, and what you prioritize creatively.
And it's so easy to get sucked into the online reviews, the forums.
Yeah.
Filling up that mental wish basket with all the latest, priciest gear. We've all done it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That pull towards the top tier camera, the super fast lens, the pro mic, it's strong. You think, if I just had that.
My stuff would look like their stuff.
Exactly. But he brings this really grounding perspective, especially if you're running a business or even just serious about the craft. Gear isn't just a fun purchase. It has to make financial sense. It's an investment. It absolutely has to earn its keep.
That point really landed with me. The idea that any gear just sitting on a shelf isn't just static.
Right. It's actively lost money, money that could be working for you somewhere else. Tools are assets, and they need to be generating value either directly through income or by enabling the work that does.
And maybe this is the most crucial point he makes early on. The fanciest gear on earth won't make your work better if you don't have the fundamentals down.
He's emphatic about this, understanding light, knowing how to expose properly, composition, how lenses actually work, color. Those core skills.
Yeah.
They are infinitely more important than the brand name on the camera body.
So true.
You could give someone $1 million setup, but if they don't know how to light a scene, frame a shot, or get the exposure right for the mood, the images just won't be compelling.
The gear just amplifies what you bring. It can't invent talent.
Precisely. It can't create competence or vision if it's not there to begin with.
It's a necessary reality check, especially when you're eyeing that big, expensive upgrade. Focus on the craft first.
And that whole philosophy really shapes his approach to investing in gear. He prioritizes tools that fit the work he does most. For him, that's things like branded content, interviews, docu-style projects.
So reliability, efficiency.
Reliability, efficiency, delivering the quality clients expect consistently. That's the benchmark, not just, is it the newest model?
Okay, so that leads naturally into the next big piece, strategic investment. Knowing when it actually makes sense to upgrade and what to upgrade. He tells a great little story about a boom mic recommendation.
Right, yeah. A colleague suggested this, really expensive microphone.
Top of the line.
Top of the line. Argued its technical specs were far superior, better audio quality, all that.
Which objectively was probably true, right? On paper, a better mic.
Sure, technically better. But the filmmaker pointed out that most of his work ends up on YouTube, embedded web videos, maybe some broadcasts.
Where the audio gets compressed quite a bit anyway.
Exactly. He realized that in the actual final playback environment, that tiny technical edge wouldn't even be noticeable to the client or the audience.
Ah, okay. So the delivery format dictates the need. That's smart.
It's a crucial insight. He recognized it was technically superior, but it wasn't a better investment for his specific context, his workflow, his deliverables. He still invested in good pro audio gear, don't get me wrong.
Of course.
But he skipped the super high-end option because the practical ROI just wasn't there for him.
That puts things in perspective.
Okay.
So building on that, when does he say an upgrade is the right move?
He flags a few key moments. One is when the technology has genuinely moved so far ahead that your older gear is becoming a liability, maybe not competitive anymore.
Makes sense.
Another trigger is clients starting to specifically ask for things, capabilities, formats that your current kit just can't deliver.
Right, direct market demand.
And the big one, personally, is hitting a creative ceiling. That feeling where your tools are actively holding you back, preventing you from executing the ideas in your head.
That one resonates, when your vision has outpaced your equipment. He mentions reaching that point himself a few years back, needing a pretty major overhaul. Camera, lenses, audio, lights, the whole shebang.
But, Reality Check couldn't afford to buy everything at once. Nobody can, usually. So he had to prioritize. Where would the first investment make the biggest splash?
And surprisingly, maybe, he started with a lens before upgrading his camera body.
Now that's interesting. Usually people go for the camera first.
Right. But he says, even mounted on his older camera, had an immediate and pretty dramatic impact on his image quality.
How so?
The contrast, the clarity, how it rendered details and colors. He said it was just a noticeable leap forward.
He described it as night and day, didn't he?
Yeah, night and day. And it didn't just improve his images, it actually kind of revitalized his enthusiasm for his work while he saved up for the other pieces he needed.
That just beautifully illustrates the principle, doesn't it? A strategic investment in the right piece of gear one that directly impacts the aesthetic you're after, or a critical part of your process, can sometimes be far more impactful than just grabbing the latest camera body off the shelf.
So the core takeaway from this first section is really vital for you listening. Building the ideal setup, it starts with understanding it's an investment.
It needs to support your growth, it needs to fit the work you actually do, and it needs to evolve strategically.
You need to invest where it genuinely makes a difference for your specific situation and your goals.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit now. Chris emphasizes that once you've considered the why, the budget and the investment side, you need to think really deeply about the how and the where.
Meaning, where do you actually use your gear? And how do you like to work? What's your process?
Exactly. This is the second big principle. Design your rig around your workflow. Chris, for instance, travels constantly for shoots.
All the time.
So he needs a setup that's powerful enough, sure, to deliver high-end results, but it also has to be portable. It has to be manageable solo, or maybe with just one other person. And it needs to allow him to move and reorganize quickly on location.
So for his specific workflow, things like size and low weight became absolute top priorities when he was selecting components.
And that's not just about preference, right? It's a practical necessity for his business model. If you're flying constantly, weight limits are real.
And versatility, too. That's key, because he's jumping between different environments and setups all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a static sit-down interview one moment.
Then the next, he's grabbing handheld gimbal B-roll, or maybe tracking shots on a slider. He needs to adapt fast, without wasting precious time on set.
Which drove him to a really critical workflow optimization, using quick release plates and mounts everywhere.
Camera cages, lights, monitors, audio recorders, little sliders.
And then the matching receivers on his tripods as mounting arms.
Exactly. So think about it. You need to move your monitor off the camera onto a C-stand. Pop. Done. Need to grab the audio recorder off the tripod for a quick handheld soundbite. Pop. Done.
No fiddling with screws, no wasting time.
It's such a small cost, but the flexibility and speed it gives you on set, he calls it an easy, quick, and cheap trick, but honestly, it's a genius workflow hack. Saves so much time and frustration.
Love that. Another big workflow change he made was switching to a V-mount battery system.
Right. This was all about streamlining power. Instead of juggling, 5 different types of batteries for the camera, the monitor, the light, the audio recorder.
Which is a nightmare.
Total nightmare. He unified it all under V-mounts. These are those blocky batteries, common in cinema, but you can get smaller ones now. And they often have extra power outputs, like D-tap or USB.
So one battery could power his camera, monitor, maybe a wireless follow focus, even the audio gear.
Pretty much, yeah. Fewer batteries to charge and manage, fewer cables creating a mess. It just makes the whole rig cleaner, faster to build, more mobile.
And he chose sizes carefully, right? To balance power and portability.
Yeah, he opted for smaller V-mounts that were still powerful enough to run everything for a decent shoot day, but kept the overall setup reasonably compact for travel, finding that practical power sweet spot. His whole travel setup is designed with this workflow in mind. He meticulously organizes his gear so it fits perfectly into specific travel cases. I think he said 3 main ones, plus a camera carry-on.
Yeah, and he chose tripod legs, light stands, even his boom pole, specifically because they fit efficiently within the dimensions of those cases.
It's not just buying good gear, it's building an entire system that is purposeful, packable, ready to jump on a plane and deliver high-quality footage in some diverse location, probably with minimal crew.
It all serves the core demands of his particular filmmaking style.
And beyond just the physical rig, he also prioritized essential functionality that needed to be built directly into the camera body itself.
Like what?
Well, things like onboard variable ND filters, absolutely crucial if you're shooting outdoors and need to quickly adjust exposure as the light changes without fiddling with physical filters all the time.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Saves a ton of time.
Or time code capabilities.
And features like false color monitoring.
Exactly. That gives you an instant visual map of your exposure levels across the image. You can see immediately if you're clipping highlights or crushing shadows without constantly staring at a tiny waveform.
And of course, robust, direct audio controls right there on the camera. These aren't just flashy specs on a list. They're tools that directly support his ability to capture good footage efficiently, often under pressure.
Now, he doesn't ignore fundamental image quality either. He mentioned having a full-frame sensor was still important for him for that cinematic depth of field, dynamic range, good low-light performance he needed.
But it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Precisely.
So the core takeaway for you here is to really think about how and where you work. Your gear should be designed to work with you, not against you.
Yeah. It's about building a system that actually facilitates your specific process and eliminates those annoying friction points that slow you down or frustrate you.
Which brings us nicely to the third core factor Chris discusses, unlocking creativity by removing limitations.
Right. And he's a big believer, it seems, in pushing the gear you already have to its absolute maximum first, really learning its quirks, understanding its capabilities inside and out.
It's about extracting every last ounce of performance from your existing tools before you even think about spending money on an upgrade. That mastery itself is part of the creative process, isn't it?
Absolutely. But as he experienced himself, there eventually comes a point where your tools do become that ceiling we talked about earlier.
Yeah, where your creative vision, maybe your evolving standards for your own work, have just surpassed what your current equipment can physically deliver.
This is where that story about the cine lens upgrade becomes really powerful again, but from a different angle. He had a good, reliable photo lens. It served him well for a time.
But as his eye developed, as his standards rose, he started to feel its creative constraints more acutely.
What kind of constraints?
Things like the relatively short focus throw, typical on photo lenses. It made pulling off really precise, smooth manual focus racks quite difficult.
Or focus breathing, where the image seems to zoom slightly in or out as you rack focus. That can be really distracting visually.
Exactly. Or maybe just how the lens handled contrast or lens flare. It just wasn't matching the specific aesthetic look he now envisioned for his work.
So upgrading to the cine lens wasn't just about adding a technical feature like, say, a wider aperture, though it did that too. It specifically expanded his creative palette.
How so, creatively?
Well, that wider aperture, maybe f1.3 or something, gave him that beautiful subject separation, that shallow depth of field, and way more flexibility in low light, but also that incredibly long 300-degree focus rotation.
Oh, right.
That meant he could suddenly execute these buttery smooth, incredibly precise focus pulls that were just physically impossible with the old lens.
The difference wasn't just like sharper pixels or something abstract. It was the concrete ability to achieve a creative look that the old lens simply couldn't provide.
Yeah, the new lens got out of the way. It allowed him to chase the image he had in his head more effectively, more directly.
So according to Chris, the clearest signal that it might be time to seriously consider an investment isn't just when a new model drops. It's when your ideas, your creative impulses, are actively being held back by the limitations of your current tools.
Yeah. The key takeaway for you listening is, be honest with yourself. Is your current gear genuinely helping you express your creative vision? Or are you constantly finding yourself fighting against its limitations to try and bring your ideas to life?
Okay, so pulling all of these threads together, the budget, the workflow, the creativity, Kristen Art's perspective makes it really clear that this elusive ideal camera setup isn't some mythical shopping list of specs.
No, it's profoundly about fit.
Fit for your budget, first off.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure your tools are smart investments that actually serve your financial goals, especially if you're running a business.
Then, fit for your workflow, building a system that actively supports how and where you actually do your work, eliminating that friction we talked about.
And finally, fit for your creativity, ensuring your tools empower you to chase your vision, not constrain it.
But perhaps the most crucial point Chris leaves us with, the real anchor of his whole philosophy, is this. The gear doesn't get the job done.
You do.
Right. Cameras, lenses, lights, microphones, they're just tools at the end of the day. They're inert objects.
It's the technical knowledge, the creative intention, the aesthetic choices you make, and, frankly, the disciplined execution that actually create compelling images and tell powerful stories.
And he makes this really thought-provoking point. Buying the most expensive, most advanced gear without having those foundational skills, it might actually do the opposite of helping you.
How so? Why would better gear hurt?
Because better gear, more advanced gear, can often be more sensitive. The margin for error sometimes shrinks.
Ah.
Mistakes in exposure or focus or even just handling the camera might become much more noticeable and potentially harder to fix cleanly in post-production.
So great gear gives you immense control, potentially, but it demands commensurately more responsibility, more skill, more discipline to use effectively and consistently.
Exactly. It raises the stakes.
That's why building your setup around what truly helps you create, what amplifies your unique vision, and maybe most importantly, what gives you the confidence to execute on set. That's paramount.
It leads to this really intentional way of thinking about your kit. Constantly assessing, what do I really need for the work I'm doing right now?
Identifying what you're genuinely outgrowing, based not on hype, but on the creative limits you actually feel.
And then deciding what truly deserves a spot in your bag because it's the right fit for you right now based on budget, workflow, and creativity.
And that brings us, I think, to our final thought for you to consider today, drawing directly from Kristen Ard's insights.
Okay.
If the ideal setup is truly about finding the right tool for you, based on its fit for your budget, your workflow, and your creativity, and if increasingly capable gear actually demands increasingly more skill, responsibility, and discipline to master.
And then what does that tell you about the continuous journey of becoming the creator you aspire to be?
It suggests that perhaps the most important investment you can make isn't necessarily in a new camera body or that fancy lens.
But maybe it's in your own development. In deepening your technical knowledge, refining your creative vision, and building the discipline to wield whatever tools you happen to have in your hands effectively.
It implies that true growth in your craft isn't just about acquiring a more impressive kit piece by piece.
It's maybe more about growing into your kit, mastering the capabilities you already possess.
And letting that mastery, that deeper understanding, illuminate the path towards the tools you might actually need next.
It's about your evolution as a creator being the driving force, isn't it? With your gear choices following intelligently behind, supporting that forward motion, rather than just chasing the next shiny thing. It's about growing into your kit as much as your kit growing with you.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thanks for the great conversation.
Yeah, really great insights today. Thanks for tuning in and spending some time with us.
Thank you for joining us on the Cinematic Trail. We hope today's journey sparked new ideas and sharpened your eye behind the lens. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and as always, happy filming.